All right, so today we're going to be diving into the world of farriery.
Okay.
And we've got some really interesting guides and resources here from RoleCatcher.
Right.
And honestly, I'm fascinated by this already, just from kind of skimming through it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field.
So let's jump in
Okay, that's good.
and talk about what it takes to actually be a farrier, because it's more than just putting horseshoes on, right?
Yeah, it really
There's
is.
got to be more to it.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, have this kind of, like you said, very basic understanding of what a farrier does.
Right.
They put the horseshoes on, they do the blacksmithing kind of thing.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. Like what else is involved?
Well, when you really break it down, a good farrier is really like a combination of a craftsman and an equine health specialist.
Okay.
So they need to not only be adept at working with their hands, the tools, the
Yeah.
metal,
Yeah.
but they also need a really deep understanding of hoof anatomy and how that relates to the horse's overall well-being.
So it's almost like, they've got to be like a podiatrist or something.
Exactly. It's like being a podiatrist for horses.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, the aesthetics of it or like making sure the shoe fits. It's about the whole health of the hoof.
Exactly.
Farrier.
Because you think about it, every stride a horse takes puts an incredible amount of pressure on those hooves.
Oh, yeah.
And so a farrier's work ensures that that pressure is distributed correctly
Right.
to prevent, pain, lameness, all sorts of issues.
And I'm assuming if a hoof isn't cared for properly, that could lead to some pretty serious problems.
Absolutely.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, you're talking everything from discomfort and an uneven gait
Right.
to chronic lameness and even, career-ending injuries in really severe cases.
Wow.
So a farrier's expertise is really essential in preventing those outcomes.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's not just about the immediate, comfort of the horse. It's about their long-term health and well-being.
Yeah, it's preventative care, it's rehabilitation,
Wow.
and it's performance enhancement all rolled into one.
Okay, so it's a pretty big responsibility.
It is.
And it sounds like it takes a lot of, specialized knowledge
It really does.
to do it well.
Yeah. Yeah, a farrier often is the first line of defense
Right.
against these kinds of hoof problems.
Right.
So they need to be able to spot the subtle signs of trouble
Oh, wow.
and know when to bring in a veterinarian
Okay.
for more specialized care.
So there's like a partnership there between the farrier and the vet.
Absolutely, that connection is crucial.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more than just, putting on a shoe, like we said.
It is. Yeah, it's really about the whole horse.
And speaking of like the scope of this profession, I was really struck by something that RoleCatcher mentioned about the job market for farriers.
Yeah.
They're predicting something like a 9% growth over the next decade,
Yeah, that's a pretty significant jump.
which is huge. I mean, this is a profession that's been around for centuries,
It is, yeah.
and it's still growing.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to the continued need
Right.
and the increasing demand for these specialized skills.
Right. And it's interesting, too, because you think about horseshoes and you think about, like, blacksmithing,
Right.
very traditional kind of craft.
Yeah.
But there's also, this guide mentions something about digital imaging and analysis tools now,
Oh, yeah.
transforming the field.
Absolutely.
What does that even look like in farriery?
Well, it's amazing how technology is kind of changing the game.
Yeah.
So you have things like 3D hoof modeling now,
Ah,
digital radiography,
okay.
where farriers can actually get an incredibly detailed look at the internal structures of the hoof.
That's pretty high tech.
It is.
I mean, I wouldn't have thought of that at all.
Yeah.
So what are the practical implications of that then?
Well, with these advancements, a farrier can actually analyze things like weight distribution, pressure points, with much greater precision than they ever could before.
Right.
And this allows them to not only diagnose problems earlier,
Okay.
but also to really tailor their shoeing techniques.
That's interesting.
It's like personalized hoof care.
So it's not just about having like a good eye anymore.
Right.
It's about being able to interpret data
Exactly.
and use that to inform your work.
Yeah, it's blending that traditional craftsmanship with modern technology
Wow. That's
for the
incredible.
best outcome for the horse.
That's really cool. I like how technology is sort of like, infiltrating all these different fields.
Yeah, it really is amazing.
Even ones that you wouldn't expect.
Right.
So we've talked a bit about, the knowledge and the sort of technological side of it.
Right.
But I'm curious about the actual work itself.
Okay.
What are some of the specific skills and challenges involved in becoming a successful farrier?
Well, I think one of the things that people might not realize is that it is physically demanding work.
Right.
I mean, you are working with heavy horseshoes.
Yeah.
You've got specialized tools.
Yeah.
You're often in awkward positions.
Yeah.
So it does require a certain level of strength and stamina.
Right.
But beyond just the brawn, there's actually a surprising amount of finesse involved as well.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, trimming a horse's hoof is not just about hacking away at it with a rasp.
Right.
You need a really delicate touch,
Okay.
an understanding of the angles,
Yeah.
the sensitivity of the structures within the hoof.
Sure.
It's really about precision.
Wow.
And then there's the artistry of shaping and fitting the horseshoes themselves,
Right.
knowing how to modify them for different conditions or performance goals.
Sure.
It's really a blend of skill and artistry.
So it's more like sculpting than shoeing, almost.
In a way, yeah, it's about understanding the anatomy,
Right.
recognizing the individual horse's need, and then using your skills to create a custom solution for their hoofs.
It's fascinating how much goes into it.
It is.
I really had no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really is. There's so much more to it than meets the eye.
it really is. And, we've talked about the physical demands and the artistry,
Right.
but we haven't even touched the mental aspect of it.
Okay.
Yeah. Farriers need to be really sharp problem solvers.
Okay.
Every horse is different. Every hoof is unique.
Right.
And they have to be able to assess each situation on the fly and determine the best course of action.
So it's not just about, memorizing techniques from a textbook.
No, not at all.
It's about being adaptable and thinking on your feet.
Exactly, because you might have a plan going in,
Right.
but then the horse reacts unexpectedly.
Oh, sure.
Or you discover an underlying issue with the hoof
Right.
that requires a different approach, so you constantly have to adjust while staying calm and focused.
Yeah. Which I imagine is easier said than done.
It can be, especially with a 1,000-pound animal.
Yeah, I was going to say that takes a certain level of, calmness under pressure.
Absolutely.
Patience, I imagine, is pretty high up there on the list of essential farrier qualities.
Oh, absolutely. Patience is key.
Because you're working with an animal that, doesn't always understand what you're doing.
Right, and let's not forget, you're also working with their owners,
Oh, that's true.
who can be just as diverse in their personalities and levels of understanding.
Right. Like a misinformed owner could unknowingly contribute to a horse's hoof problems down the line.
Exactly, and that's why communication is so crucial in this line of work.
Okay, so tell me more about that. Like, why are customer service skills so important for farriers?
Well, a farrier needs to be able to explain what they're doing clearly to the owner,
Right.
many of whom might not be familiar with, all the intricacies of hoof care.
Sure.
So it's about educating them,
Okay.
addressing their concerns, and building trust.
Yeah, because you don't want them to just think you're slapping a shoe on and calling it a day.
Exactly.
Right.
They need to understand the why behind it.
Yeah, and I imagine there are situations where you might have to have some of those, difficult conversations we've talked about in other deep dives.
Oh, absolutely. Like, for example, you might have an owner who insists on a certain type of shoe
Right.
because they've always used it
Sure.
without really understanding that it might not be the best option for their horse's current needs or discipline.
Right, right.
So a farrier who can effectively communicate and educate the owner in those situations is invaluable.
It's about finding that balance between respecting the owner's wishes,
Right.
but also advocating for what's best for the horse.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've got to be a diplomat.
In a way, yeah, you've got to be able to navigate those conversations.
And I'm sure those conversations are only getting, more complex as the industry evolves.
Absolutely. And that ties back to something we touched on earlier. A farrier needs to be a lifelong learner.
Okay.
The equine industry is constantly changing.
Right.
New research techniques are emerging all the time.
Yeah, and owners are probably getting bombarded with information from all sides, too.
Oh, absolutely.
So how does a farrier stay ahead of the curve in such a dynamic field?
Well, continuing education is key.
Okay.
So attending conferences, workshops, seminars, those are all important.
Right.
And then there were the professional certifications.
Oh, right. The guide mentioned those, the certified journeyman farrier, certified farrier, and certified master farrier.
Exactly.
What do those actually entail? Like, what do you have to do to earn those certifications?
Well, each level requires more experience,
Okay.
advanced skills, a deeper understanding of hoof care.
Right.
And to achieve these certifications, farriers undergo some pretty rigorous testing.
Okay, so like what?
So you're talking written exams, practical demonstrations, and even continuing education requirements.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a one and done kind of thing.
No, it's an ongoing commitment to professional development.
Interesting. Okay, so these certifications act like milestones in a farrier's career progression then.
They do, yeah. Each of brings more recognition, more opportunities.
Makes sense, kind of like leveling up in a video game,
Exactly.
but with real-world skills.
Exactly, and those credentials matter. They give horse owners confidence in a farrier's expertise, and they can even open doors to more specialized work, like working with high-performance horses.
Right. It's like the difference between seeing a general practitioner and a specialist.
Exactly.
You want the best of the best for your equine athlete or whatever.
Absolutely.
So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, I want to be a farrier. This sounds amazing. What does that journey actually look like?
Well, the traditional path and what RoleCatcher really highlights is the apprenticeship route.
Okay, so finding someone who's already established in the field.
Exactly. An experienced farrier who can take you under their wing.
Okay.
Because learning the craft hands-on is really invaluable.
So you're not just observing, you're actually doing the work.
Exactly. You're gradually taking on more responsibility as you learn. It's like a true mentorship.
And I'm assuming finding the right mentor is crucial.
It is, yeah. You want someone who can guide you, critique your work, help you hone your skills.
Right. And who you can also learn from on like a, personal level too.
Absolutely. It's a relationship.
Right. It is a relationship.
It is.
So it sounds like, finding that right mentor is going to be really important for anyone who wants to go down this path.
Absolutely.
And in this day and age, I imagine there are probably also a lot of online resources that can be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. There's a wealth of information available online.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, RoleCatcher, for example, has a whole section
Okay.
dedicated to building a strong farrier portfolio.
Okay, that's interesting. So tell me more about that. Like what does that involve?
Well, one of the things they really emphasize is the importance of before and after photos.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah, a visual demonstration.
Exactly.
People can really see the transformation.
Right, because you can talk about, improving hoof balance and all that.
Right.
But when you can actually see it,
Yeah.
it's much more powerful.
It's like night and day sometimes, right?
Exactly. So having those visuals in your portfolio can be really impactful.
Especially for someone who's just starting out.
Absolutely. It helps build credibility.
Right. You've got to be able to prove yourself.
Exactly.
Now, what about actually getting out there and getting hired?
Right.
What are some tips for aspiring farriers who are ready to, take that next step?
Well, RoleCatcher actually has some fantastic interview tips,
Oh,
specifically for aspiring farriers.
like what kinds of things?
Well, they even provide examples of common interview questions.
Oh, that's helpful. It's like having a cheat sheet.
It is kind of like that.
So what are some examples of the kinds of questions that aspiring farriers should be prepared to answer?
Well, some of them are designed to gauge your technical skills and problem-solving abilities.
Okay.
So, for instance, an interviewer might ask something like,
Yeah.
how would you approach shoeing a horse with particularly sensitive feet?
Okay, so really specific.
Yeah. Or they might ask you to describe a time when you had to adapt your shoeing technique to address an unexpected hoof issue.
So really trying to understand your thought process.
Exactly how you handle those challenging situations.
Yeah, but I imagine it's not all technical questions, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They also want to see that you have the interpersonal skills
Right.
necessary to succeed in this field.
Because as we've talked about, communication is key.
Absolutely. So they might ask you something like,
Yeah.
how would you handle a disagreement with a client about the best shoeing approach for their horse?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Or how would you explain a complex hoof issue
Right.
to an owner who's not familiar with all the technical jargon?
Right. It's got to be able to speak their language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So being able to communicate effectively, build trust, navigate those potentially delicate conversations,
Yeah.
that's all really crucial.
And that kind of brings us back to something we've touched on throughout this whole deep dive,
Right.
which is that there's this human element to farriery. It's not just about the hooves, it's about the people too.
It's about building relationships, understanding the needs of both the horse and the owner,
Right.
and providing compassionate care.
You're like a horse therapist almost.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah,
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
we have.
Learned a ton about farriery,
Absolutely.
from the technical skills to the people skills to the importance of continuing education. Right?
Right.
It's clearly a profession that requires a really unique blend of, physical strength
Right.
technical skill, and compassionate care.
It's a fascinating field.
It is. And for anyone listening who's feeling drawn to this blend of, traditional craftsmanship and cutting-edge care,
Yeah.
it sounds like Farrier offers a really challenging but incredibly rewarding career path.
It certainly does.
And for those who want to dig deeper, we'll be sure to link to all the resources we've mentioned from RoleCatcher
Yeah, they're a great resource.
in the show notes so you can explore this further on your own.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Farrier.
Sounds good.
We hope this episode has given you a newfound appreciation for the artistry and the dedication that goes into caring for these magnificent creatures.
Absolutely.
That are horses.
For sure.
Thanks for listening, everyone.